Alright, I'd like to now go over the parts of the sheep brain. This is going to be a little bit challenging for me because I have to hold the video camera while also showing you structures. So here are the two cerebral hemispheres of the sheep brain. You can see that a student has cut them apart. We can see that there is still some of the meninges attached to the brain. We see the dura mater shown right here, the tough mother as it's called. And tightly adherent to the surface of the brain would be pia mater, which means gentle mother. Now, in class, I will show you a better example, but I don't know if you can see in there these kind of spiderwebby looking fibers. That is actually the arachnoid. That's the middle layer of the meninges. I think you can see that there. Kind of looks creepy, like spider webbing that you would put and decorate for your house during Halloween. You can see it really well right here. Okay, so maybe not so much, and I'll show you that in class. Now, what do we notice about the cerebral hemispheres once we take them apart? First of all, we notice the space in between. That is the lateral ventricle. Of course, there's another lateral ventricle in the other cerebral hemisphere. Now, this piece of white matter here is a tract, a collection of axons, and it's connecting the right side of the sheep brain to the left. So this piece of white matter is called a tract, and it's a corpus callosum. All right, next part that you should notice, all of this area would be the cerebral cortex, and of course the sheep brain would have its primary motor cortex and somatosensory cortex. Students ask if they have to be able to identify the precentral gyrus and the postcentral gyrus, and the answer is no. We can't really discern that on the sheep brains. They have different gyri, and they just look mushy anyway. So, what other parts of the brain can we discern and notice here? Well, let's get an up-close picture here. Here we have our lateral ventricle filled with cerebral spinal fluid. This region right here, this is called the thalamus. Now we would find the third ventricle surrounded in this structure. On this side we can see the thalamus right here. The structure that's below it right here, this is going to be the hypothalamus. It's just a general area. There's the hypothalamus on this side. And then attached to the hypothalamus is the pituitary gland, the anterior and posterior pituitary. You cannot discern on the sheep brain which one is which. So again, I'm going to try and get a better up-close picture here. This region right here is the thalamus. If we point down here, we want you to say hypothalamus, and then this is the pituitary that is attached to the hypothalamus. It's attached to it by a stalk called the infundibulum. Now, off of the thalamus, you have the epithalamus, and the only structure of the epithalamus we want you to know is this cute little structure right here that's been cut in half, and this is the pineal gland. The pineal gland, of course, releases melatonin and helps regulate your day-night cycle. Okay, so again, thalamus, hypothalamus, pituitary, and then this little finger-like extension right here is called the pineal gland. It represents the epithalamus. Now, after we get to the epithalamus, the pineal gland, you're going to see these two bulges over here. Now this consists of the midbrain, this region right here. And this sheep brain, if I remove the pineal gland and turn, you can see the posterior aspect of these two bulges. I'm going to use the other side because the pineal gland isn't in the way then. So here we have the posterior aspect of the brain. I'm pulling down the cerebellum right here. so that I can show you these two bulges. Now there would be two on the left side and two on the other side of the brain, right there. Now these bulges, 1, 2, 3, 4, those are called the Corpora Quadrigemina, meaning 4 bodies. And they represent the midbrain, like I said. Oh, it's so hard to do this and hold everything in place for you. So here are 2 of the 4 bodies. This is the superior colliculi, and this is the inferior colliculi. And the superior colliculi help move your eyes to anything in the distance that might be ominous or threatening. The inferior colliculus helps you turn your head to any loud, threatening sound. And the idea is if something's coming crashing through the wall, you want to see what's coming at you, you want to discern if it's dangerous or not, and you want to be able to get out of the way. So again, here's our cerebral hemisphere, here's the cerebellum. I've simply pulled it away so I can see these Corpora Quadrigemina, these 2 bumps. And if you want a lateral perspective, here's the thalamus again. Here would be the epithalamus with a bit of the pineal gland still there. And now here's the midbrain. And we can see the superior colliculi and the inferior colliculi. And of course, there's a superior colliculus and inferior colliculus on the other side as well. So again, 4 of them together, Corpora Quadrigemina. Now, as we get past the midbrain, this region, in between my thumbs, this represents the pons. So let me get this dura mater out of the way. So this area right here to right here, with this little bulge right there, that's the pons. And the pons is important for, it helps regulate your respiratory rate. It also is involved in micturition or urinating. The pons is also important for sleeping as well. So I remember pouncing on the pillow of pons and peeing, all the pees. Now as we get back here, after the pons to right here, this is the medulla oblongata, this region. Now, again, I don't know how well you can see this, it's difficult to tell, but this area is the pons. You can see this little bulge, and from here to here, this bulge here, this marks the medulla oblongata, where you see this part, that's the spinal cord. Behind the medulla oblongata, we are seeing the cerebellum. The medulla oblongata is very important for regulating heart rate. It has a cardioacceleratory center to increase heart rate and a cardioinhibitory center to decrease heart rate. And it also has a vasomotor center where it can cause vasoconstriction of your blood vessels. The cerebellum back here, if you notice very carefully, I'm going to just turn this upside down so you can see, it has branches of white matter that extend through it. And it looks like a tree inside of it. And we call all this area of white matter that extends like a tree the arbor vitae. And we have little, just like on trees we have leaves, in the cerebellum we have these little sleeves of tissue. You can see that I'm separating them. And we call these little sleeves folia, like foliage on a tree. So these are the folia on the arbor vitae, or tree of life. The cerebellum, of course, is very important for comparing the planned movement that you generated in your premotor cortex with the actual movement that you are doing, and then help send a corrective command back through the thalamus to the frontal lobe. So literally, it's your cerebellum that's responsible. Like if you were going to take a shot with a basketball on the basketball hoop, before the basketball even leaves your fingertips, you have a really good sense of whether it's going to be on target or not. And that's all because of your cerebellum comparing from moment to moment your planned action with what you're actually doing. All right, so going back here, the thalamus. I didn't tell you what it does. The thalamus is the router of action potentials. It's the operator, if you will, routing the circuit switches. So it'll send the appropriate incoming commands and outgoing commands to the different parts of the brain. Below the thalamus, we have the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus does many things in your body. It's responsible for many of your primitive emotions. It's responsible for thermoregulation. It's responsible for the synthesis of certain hormones like the ADH and oxytocin, just to name a few, but so many more. So hypothalamus is very important. It's part of the autonomic nervous system. And then down here we have the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland, of course, has two parts, the adenohypophysis, or anterior pituitary, and the neurohypophysis, referred to as the posterior pituitary. And the posterior pituitary simply stores the hormones made by the hypothalamus. You'll learn more in lecture. And the anterior pituitary stores and synthesizes its own 7 hormones, and you'll learn more about those hormones in class. Okay, that concludes my discussion on the sheep brain. Sorry, I forgot to point something else out on the underside of the sheep brain. Right here, you're seeing 2 sets of cranial nerves. This nerve right here is the optic nerve, cranial nerve number 2. And this structure right here that you're seeing me fold down, that's the olfactory bulb. So I'll show you a side perspective. Olfactory bulb, that sat in the cribriform plate. Let me see if I can put down my camera again. So this is cranial nerve number 2, the optic nerve, and this is the olfactory bulb, cranial nerve number 1. It sits in the cribriform plate, and these nerve endings, olfactory nerve, would go through the olfactory foramina into the nasal cavity. The optic nerve comes posteriorly. Again, nerve means a collection of axons outside of the central nervous system. You have one from each side, and they come to this structure right here called the optic chiasm. That means crossing over. And so you're going to have hemidecussation. Some of the axons are going to cross over and some will stay on the same side. And once you get to the optic chiasm, the optic nerve becomes the optic tract. So now we have axons actually going into the brain tissue back to the occipital lobe. Okay, that's it.